So, why? Why did I become an architect?
So press one.
Press one. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Why did this guy in the mid 80s become an architect? My parents, they had a very social life, rich social life, and our house was often filled with all kinds of guests. One character that stood out from the others was the architect. I understood from the way it was spoken about him that he was something special. My mother was also a little thrilled because he was good looking. He dressed a little differently from the other friends, had long hair and his trousers were tucked into high leather boots, a little bit like Benny Andersson in ABBA. He always arrived a little late to the parties and slid with his Porsche into our driveway. My sister and I watched him in admiration through the window, and as he got out of the car, often accompanied by an equally glamorous girlfriend. It was still the 70s, so there was always someone new by his side. He also could draw whatever we kids asked him for. A cat, a car, a cowboy. It was like magic coming out from his hands. So my perception of an architect was this character. What he actually did, I had no idea, but the memory of him, this guy, was important for my later choice of profession. My plan of the future was something completely different. I was a Royal Marine Commando, that is, the translation of that. Here in this place, of all places, I met two guys, and they wanted to become architects. Still, I hadn't really know what an architect did, but the guys were really nice, and I also remember my parents' cool friend. I also discovered that the success with the girls was so much better with a watercolor pad in my hand than with a military guy in a dirty uniform. So the matter was settled. I decided. I put the beret on the shelf and I applied to the architecture school together with my new nice friends. To everyone's surprise, including my own, I was the only one who got in to the school. And the start was really, really shaky for me. Our professor at the first lecture said, "Welcome, architects." And I thought, why? Am I already an architect? Good. You are now entering the world of architecture. Use us teachers as good as you can. And I didn't really get the message. I spent more time, I was new to Stockholm, I spent more time with my new friends at nightclubs rather than understand the wonders of architecture. So my first year at architecture school, I was a lousy student. And after the first year of studies, I went to Finland, to our family house there, and one of my relatives said, "Have you seen the ugly houses close to the city center by this guy Alvar Aalto?" Okay, I went to the ugly houses. I haven't noticed them at all during my previous years in this city, in this town. So I went there and I discovered something beautiful, full of life and joyfulness. I was hooked up. My learning curve went from 0 to 120% in a couple of minutes. I discovered Alvar Aalto. That's exactly the kind of architect I want to be. Someone who designs furniture, textiles, glass, houses, buildings, and city plans, and seems to have so much fun. I wanted to create stuff just like Alvar Aalto, and I read all the books about him, especially this one is, if you haven't read it, read it. And I was, as I said, I was obsessed. So if you want to ask me something about Alvar Aalto, ask me. I can answer everything. To fully understand a person, the background is important. In my case, I know that my kind of little messy family history has been very crucial. My grandmother was Russian. Her father, who I had as a great idol, I met him, is this guy. And he was in the service of the Tsar in Russia, in the kind of, it's called the Chevalier Guard, which was the Tsar's lifeguard. And in this picture, this is Alexandra Fyodorovna. She was the sister of the Tsar. And that guy there became later important in Finland. That's Gustav Mannerheim, who later became president in Finland. So, and this is my hero. Anyway, they had to flew to Finland 1917 by obvious reasons to be a member of the Tsar. It was not really a good way. So they made their way to Finland. So they became immigrants. My grandfather, he was a Swede and partly raised in England. He traded in wood and spotted my young grandmother in Finland on the street. And they married later on and settled in Finland. They had my father. This is the little town in Finland called Jakobstad. And they had my father and my mother. They had my father, sorry, and my father met my mother. So I'm half Finnish. I'm a quarter Russian and a quarter Swedish. I think that mixing for me has been quite important. Who I am. I'm calm as a Finn. I'm rational as a Swede, and jovial, not evil, as a Russian. So I was obsessed with Alvar Aalto, and I discovered more joyful artists and architects, such as Matisse, Brunelleschi, also an early hero of mine, and Luca della Robbia, and the architects and the artists that collaborated, such as Brunelleschi and della Robbia, already in the 15th century, was an eye-opener for me. The art and design of products attracted me more and more. I discovered the school of Bauhaus and their way of learning architecture and design. So I hang out in the weekends in the furniture stores in Stockholm, and I learned everything, absolutely everything about contemporary furniture design. At the same time, I was inspired by our own building culture. Old barns, log houses in the countryside, became sources for the houses and interiors I carried out in the early years of my practice. I tried to combine these houses, agrarian houses, with my fascination for the early modernists. And the teacher and later employer who meant the most to me at architecture school was a professor named Jan Henriksson. He reinforced my perception that the joy of creation was exactly what would become my way of practicing the profession. Jan had worked for Peter Celsing, a giant in Swedish architecture with lots of interesting and beautiful buildings on his CV, such as this building we are sitting in right now. And Peter Selsing had joy and artistic aspect of the profession were also highly valued. This is a sketch by Peter Selsing for this building. I painted pictures and did competitions in those early years at Jan Henriksson's office. When my architect friends complained about how boring it was to make tender drawings for doors and windows, I didn't even know what that was. I was more concerned about the quality of the gouache and the watercolors I did. But suddenly, John got a real job. Instead of all the competitions we did all over the world, and we lost every one of them, he was given the commission to design a new national building in Örebro, in the middle of Sweden. At that time, I was the only employee in the office. We needed people. So I called my friends from architecture school, and the bank was actually designed by us interns. Totally. But against all odds, we managed to put together a fairly decent house. You remember the house. During the years at the architecture school, Swedish 20th century classicism became internationally relevant with a series of exhibitions and books. Gunnar Asplund was a central figure in during that time. I was very inspired by his playful interpretation of classicism and later functionalism, always with the lightness and joy in hand. In addition, he also made furniture and products like my hero Alvar Aalto. Another architect who has inspired me quite a lot actually, who does totally different things but what I do, but that is actually Frank Gehry. I have visited him twice in Los Angeles, and both times we didn't talk about architecture at all. We talked about ice hockey. His great interest as the Canadian, as Frank Gehry actually is. And he thought that I'm a Swede was supposed to have great knowledge about the sport. But I was more fascinated by his free approach to the construction, especially the early 70s and 80s project that he did, because they were more conceivable in relation to my own practice. Another great architect that I often come back to is Ralph Erskine, who worked based on human scale and with a clear ambition to relate to our Nordic climate. The solutions are always joyful. Actually, I can list lots of architects who inspire me, but one thing is certain. The longer I've been practicing, the greater understanding and admiration I have for the work of my colleagues. When I was younger and new to the profession, I basically thought that everyone else was useless except myself. Nowadays, I basically think that everyone else is very talented, and I feel like a beginner. To quote Oscar Wilde, "I'm not young enough to have all the answers. I'm not young enough to have all the answers." Collaborating with other colleagues can also be so much better when it works. 1 + 1 can make 3. I will mention 2 guys here. It's Gert Wingård and Johan Pajo, the landscape architect. We have done so many projects together and always enjoyable. Cooperation, of course, with our own employees there can also bring the same euphoria. References flies in the air, like the entrance at the Riksbank in Copenhagen, the ceiling in the library of Villa Maria, Leverens wall in Björkungen Church, that park in MoMA in New York, the courtyard of Skokloster Castle. Sharing references and keeping track of the contemporaries has always been a working tool for me. I also know my architecture history. which always provides support when creating something new. History is present but can never be copied. If I have a method, it revolves a lot around my constant sketching. I have ordered sketchbooks with my name printed on the cover. I carry these books with me everywhere. Not so much text as you can see, but all the more or less clearly recorded thoughts. And I'm also very, very proud of the fact that many successful offices started their careers with us. Marge, who has been on this stage, Adolf Frick, Elding Oskarsson, Chris Martin at Mass Productions, and also Andreas. And others have, and among others, have started successful offices after we had the opportunity to borrow them for a couple of years. We started our company 29 years ago with the motto that everything communicates. We mixed design, advertising, graphic design, and architecture in the same office, which at that time was something completely new at the time. The outside world tried to define, who are you? Are you an advertising company? Are you an architecture office? We just did what we thought was fun and didn't really care what anyone thought, but we made good money, which meant that we got followers quite soon. After a few years, though, I felt it was right to concentrate on being a purely architecture office, which we are today. I often find joy in visual arts. A boring moment becomes so much easier with Karin Mamma Andersson, Matisse. No, sorry, that was David Hockney. And music is also an inspiration, not in a way that I analyze the lyrics to try to understand the message, but rather to capture visual and emotional mood. Videos, covers, and expression on stage were at least as important to me. So maybe Kraftwerk, The Smiths Cure, Pet Shop Boys, and anything Paul Weller came up with inspired me. As you probably understand by now, the joy of designing is central to my life and to my business. I'm 100% driven by passion. I'm not a theorist, but I'm not an anti-intellectual. A kind of method exists with me after all, but it's difficult to formulate. Someone else has to do that. In the early 90s, when I started my own office, I dreamed about drawing in town halls, villas, libraries. I discovered that the interiors were the assignments I was given. I had a great interest in furniture and was happy to draw a table or a chair or something else for these projects. I suddenly became a furniture designer in people's eyes. At the same time, there were some students at the Royal College in London of my own age who began to make furniture in the same spirit. And a kind of return to a simpler everyday item, a kind of aesthetic that Scandinavian design from the 30s exhibited, but mixed with, in my case, folk art. These Englishmen, Jasper Morrison, James Irving, Tom Dixon, among others, came to mean a lot to me as friends and colleagues. They took me to Italy and with the exciting Italian furniture industry. I learned a lot and find my place on earth where I'm always inspired. In a specific armchair at this hotel in Milan, Diana Majestic, I have sketched out many of my best pieces of furniture in a specific armchair. I don't know what is so special about this place, but I had a mild panic attack a few years ago when the armchair was gone. But with a little persuasion, it is now back in its place in the front of the large window facing the garden. And a bar in Milan also became quite important to who I am. We choose this bar as a meeting point because James Irving lived close by. At that time, this bar was kind of run-down bar, not that fancy at all. We were also seen here, and then we young designers decided to have a little party, a cocktail, during the furniture fair. And we probably had no idea at the time that this tradition completely took over, it took its own path and became synonymous with the furniture fair. Maurizio, the owner, is eternally grateful to us, and I will probably get free drinks for the rest of my life. When you, like me, move in different scales, from city plans to candlesticks, you end up in a different compartment. The outside world tries to define you, who you are. Architect, designer, or artist. I felt early in my career that I had to fit in somewhere. A real architect doesn't make candlesticks. A designer can't design houses. Can you really exhibit your paintings in a real gallery? Questions that worried me then, but today I can feel a joy in the fact that I succeeded in creating my own way of working in the profession. I call myself an architect. I am who I am, and I intend to continue with that. And I will end this speech with a quote and a vision. First there was joy, and my vision is to make life a little bit better and more beautiful for everyone. That's the reason why I become an architect.
Thank you. That was a travel.
Yeah.
It was funny that at the very beginning you said your family had a very rich social life.
Yep.
And there is a social life at the end with the Barbasso.
Yeah, it's part of the family's history.
And do you think we should, or actually, architects should socialize a bit more, or is that an important part of the
we had
profession?
Me and Andreas, we had a little conversation before this session tonight, and Andreas said something that, when you started architecture school, we are all free. We think that everything is possible, but then you started architecture school, and suddenly everything is so serious. Architecture is not that easy. It's not supposed to be fun. This is a serious matter, and you have to fight against that, I think.
Yeah, which is true.
Yeah.
And actually also by socializing, probably in Milano, you're doing furniture design as part of your work, must have been maybe lead to some other projects or this socialization parts.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably yes.
Meet people, develop conversations.
I have a credo for myself is that say yes, because if you say yes, something will happen. If you say no, you're sure that nothing will happen.
So so we go tonight for a drink. But actually, what you have something, an advice for young designers that you mentioned in an interview, that you say you won't get there by being shy. Don't hold back your opinions and have fun.
Yeah.
So have you seen many colleagues?
I don't know why I said that, because I'm quite shy. So.
Yeah. Well, you are a good communicator, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but actually opening the mouth and actually trying to find your voice, and you have been fighting to, or like working on having or being the professional that you wanted to be, not trying to fit in a box. So, do you think like shy or maybe not socializing is a barrier that sometimes architects have in terms of establishing their own voice and practice?
Yeah, one advice is to do whatever you like. If you have a drive to do do whatever you like, do that. So don't think, just do it. I think that's a quite something you can bear in mind, that you should do that. And as I said in my little speech here, that I was in the beginning of my career, I was a little, I tried to fit in because I was doing furniture because I liked it, and the real architect said, "Are you doing furniture? Okay. Did you went to Konstfack? Are you an interior designer?" So no, I'm an architect. So why don't you do buildings? Well, I can do buildings as well. So I tried. I was a little unsecure then, because but then suddenly I realized that I don't give a damn. I would do whatever I like, and from that moment it's been so much easier.
Yeah, that's good. Also, so funny to see that the practices that you have mentioned, that were, you said you borrowed them for a while.
Yeah.
What do you think that has happened? I mean, there has been something there, like the people that either you pick them well or you found them well.
But I think maybe it was like, when you are a young student, that if at architecture school, Andreas has got great talent. And if Andreas comes to my office, they will be, other friends of Andreas that said, I want to go there as well. So it's kind of I have no idea. I think what I always have tried to do is to give great responsibility to every architect that comes to our office. So you take care of this. Maybe it's a little bit lazy of me, but often it has turned out to be quite good.
Have you had a moment where you have regretted that? You say, "Oh man, I should have checked that before."
Yeah, I mean, when I don't hire people any longer, because I know that I can do wrong decisions. So
I don't know what you mean by that.
I mean, someone that I thought, oh, she's great, and she's turned out to be a disaster.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I don't trust myself any longer.
I have realized when in our case, I'm too kind. I will take everyone.
Yeah, me too. I'm the same. Just come if you want to come to our office, please join us.
Yeah.
And but sometimes you have to be a little bit more careful.
We associate with you, of course, a lot of success. I wonder if you could share with us a story of failure. One of them, not all of them, that what you have experienced, because it's also nice to have that part. And also, what have you learned from that? Do you have a story to share?
Failures. I mean, not every project is. If you look at our website, you will find the projects that we think are good enough to be shown, and all the other projects are not that good. If you don't find them on the internet, they're probably not that good.
Yeah, I mean, but is there something that you have experienced that was a
failure? Well, sometimes our office has a kind of a brand name, and that means that we can be used for people that comes to us and ask for a sketch for something, a villa or an office building or whatever, and then you hear nothing from them. And then years later, they will pop up a building somewhere, and your name is on it, but you did a sketch, and 10 years ago, and that is of course a failure.
Oh yeah, but how to act? Do you have probably a lawyer?
No, we don't do that. Just forget it and move on. Next project.
What do you consider an absolute no-go in architecture nowadays? Something that should never be done, or no matter the circumstances?
Well, I'm a yes guy, so that's a tricky question. I have this kind of entrepreneurial, mind. So I always try to find something good about in every. I mean, and of course, so it's hard to. I try to say. I try to say yes.
All right. It's funny that you mentioned that you described yourself at the end, because I wanted to ask. I had on my list to ask you how you define yourself. So,
Architect.
An architect. Yeah, I think that's all. We could maybe one last learning, which will be what has been the longest that. What took you the longest to learn about architecture or design?
Yeah, what took me a long time is to understand the processes of when you do the planning, the zoning, and I mean if you go to the city council, where building permissions are given, there is a kind of a system where you have who's the head of that, and you think that this the way of handling your building permits are done in a way that is very rational, and you can understand it, but in real life it's not like that. You don't know. It took me 20 years to understand who really decides, who's in charge for real, and that's a tricky learning curve to understand, because it has nothing to do with the organization scheme. It's something else. It can be politics. It can be who is strong at the office at the moment, and that's a tricky part to understand. And also don't be shy, because you think that the client have all the answers. They don't.
Even if you are shy, we should say you're shy.
Yeah,
don't be shy.
Yeah, I'm a little shy, but
Thomas, thank you for the nice talk. We're going to have right now the round of discussion, but first, thank you for the talk. You can take a seat, and we will start the round table discussion in a minute.